told me that. She had dark, greasy hair that fell to her shoulders and a perfectly white center part. When she spoke, I would stare at the part and will her to run her fingers through her hair. She never did. After staying at the lab each day as long as physically possible, I walked the 12 blocks back to the sprawling, decrepit house where I lived with most of a men's intramural rugby team. The room I'd rented was up in the attic, half the price of anywhere else I'd found, with a single narrow window and sloping ceilings I crashed into once or twice each day. Up there with me was a curly-haired rugby boy named Graham, who had a new injury each time I saw him. A split lip, ragged stitches beneath one eye, a wrist so swollen it hurt me to look at. He seemed too delicate for such a violent sport. But I knew violence was not proportional to mass, latent as it was, and something as small as an atom. He'd grown up in northern Montana, close to where my great-aunt lived. This, along with his immediate and unflagging belief that my job at the lab meant I was a genius, created a warmth between us. We slipped into a strange domestic orbit in spite of our utter lack of similarity, in spite of my boyfriend, Caleb, who was working at a startup across the country, and the rugby boy's girlfriend, Kay, whom I'd met briefly when she helped him move into the house. She'd worn cowboy boots and a flannel, had the sort of walk that made boys whistle. Measured against her, I found myself lacking. This made it more satisfying when the rugby boy ignored her calls so we could finish dinner. Our intimacy was not physical, or was no more physical than the way our shoulders tilted together as we watched terrible movies on the couch late at night, or the way he sometimes fell asleep with his head resting against my thigh. Our intimacy was two children playing house. The way he paid for our groceries with cash he'd stockpiled in his sock drawer from selling weed, waving off my gestures of refusal, though in reality I was perpetually a paycheck away from overdrawing my bank account. The way he had water boiling on the stove in the attic's tiny kitchen when I got home from the lab. The way I tilted the cheap box of pasta into the water without a word. We ate straight from the pot, no matter what we cooked, so as not to create more dishes. Our intimacy was forks occasionally clinking into one another, flecks of pasta sauce staining our skin and clothes. It was, above all else, the mutual willingness to see only the best in one another. "It's a shame you don't want kids, Rafi," he said to me once, as if my DNA were so valuable that not passing it on was some kind of loss for the world. I'd gotten the job at the lab by pretending I'd worked through all my difficulties with physics, a lie I still hovered on the edge of believing. The job was a doorway, a wormhole that would lead me to the life I wanted, acceptance to a PhD program, a prestigious postdoc, research papers and discoveries, and the inner workings of the universe revealed. I'd emailed the professor who ran the lab during my last year of college and begged him to take a chance on me. True, my transcript was unimpressive, but what I lacked in pedigree and proof, I tried to make up for in conviction. "Dear Professor," I wrote, then listed all the extra math courses I'd taken to give myself the necessary background for rigorous research. This, I told him, was what I wanted to do with my life, and I would put in whatever work was necessary. Even in spaces less public than emails, even in the dark corners of my brain that admitted no visitors, I held entirely to this rhetoric. Some part of me must have known that my conviction was a construction that had no capacity for flex. That unlike a skyscraper built to sway with the wind, any gust at all would be enough to cause collapse. When I wasn't pretending to be an astrophysicist or a housewife, I was hanging around a sculptor named Brett, pretending to be an artist. I'd come across her work in a gallery I'd wandered into on one of my first days in the city and recognized her name. We'd gone to the same high school, lived down the street from one another, though we hadn't been friends. Coincidences in those months felt imperative. My work, after all, was tracking the ways in which seemingly random alignments were proof of invisible underlying structure. I asked the gallery owner for Britt's business card, sent an email before I could convince myself not to. "I think we might have gone to the same school," I wrote. "I came across one of your sculptures, the one where the girl is breaking open her ribcage, and inside there's a whole galaxy. I can't stop thinking about it."